Welcome to Terrible Fishing on Gold Country Radio. We got fun this weekend. June 1st and 2nd is a free fishing weekend. And at Lake of the Woods, we have tomorrow kiddie pools and fenced off areas just for fish. So our young ones can go ahead and go out there and catch fish and just have a good old time. They even got a small one for the 6 and unders. Can you imagine watching your 4-year-old catch a fish? Tomorrow, it can happen at Lake of the Woods. Also, that pool is also great for those with special needs. It is just an absolutely wonderful time. Now, Lake of the Woods is warming up nice. The bass are hitting, the perch are hitting, and of course the crappie, one of my favorite things to fish for too, are up and up and up, and they're just hitting everything. So use a very small jig and just go out there and have a good old time. Fish Lake is having a great time with trout as well. Also, go over to Gerber and you can go ahead and catch some really big perch and some really big crappie over there. Our lakes in the area are just bustling right now. Go over to Howard's Prairie or Hyatt. They have fresh stock and they are just kicking it over there. Also over at Emigrants, which is one of my favorite crappie lakes because they got big old giant crappie over at Emigrant Lake. Go over to Willow Lake, not too far past Fish Lake, down the hill a little bit. Willow Lake, beautiful little lake to go kayaking, take a small boat on, and catch your limit as much as you want on perch. The trout are hitting pretty good there, and the bass are hitting very good there. So, to be honest, this weekend, I think each and every one of you ought to be out on the water. You don't need a fishing license this weekend. June 1st and 2nd is a free fishing weekend. So, go out to any water near you and just get a line wet. Have fun. Have a picnic. Enjoy the time with your family. Go to Lake of the Woods tomorrow. And every one of your children will be able to catch a fish with the help of the staff there, which is first rate. I wish I could be there tomorrow with you guys, but I have other obligations. But normally I would be. But please, take advantage of this free fishing weekend. Pick a lake near you, river, waterway, whatever you want, and go out there and have good time. So, now that it's Memorial Day has passed us, the Williamson's River has been opened up to the general public. And get a red-banded trout. Oh my goodness. Red-banded trout is so much fun to catch. Use a small little spinner. Remember, you can't use a treble hook on the Williamsons, but you can use a single hook. So find a spinner with a single hook and go out there and have a good old time. So thank you very much, and let's go on to our next segment. Today, we're going to talk about what is needed to get started fishing. So, when you think about the first thing you need, you're probably thinking fishing pole, right, Mike? Well, you'd be kind of right if you're a minor or a child, because you need a fishing license. And the nice thing about that is for children, they're free. So you don't need a fishing license if you're a little kid. If you're a 12-year-old or older, you're going to need a youth license if you're a minor. And then if you're an adult, you need an adult license. Nice thing about fishing licenses, that is a way for the Department of Forestry to grow fish, stock the fish, maintain the boat ramps and the docks. It is a wonderful thing to do in order to support the hobby. So now that you got your fishing license, or you don't need one because this weekend you don't need a fishing license. Free fishing weekend, June 1st and 2nd. So you don't need one, so we can kind of forget that until Monday. But you will need to get a little bit something else. So how do we go about picking a fishing pole? Well, a great all-around single pole choice is either a medium or a medium light action fast rod. What does that mean, Mike? Well, On the shaft, or the blank, as it's formally called, but we'll call it the shaft. On the shaft of every rod, there's information written just above the grip. There you will find the type of shaft or blank it is made of. First is the action. It depicts how much power the rod has. What's that? Well, it's how stiff the rod is going up that blank or that shaft. The next is the speed of the rod, how much it flexes towards the end. This will allow you to cast farther and feel the bite better. It's the sensitivity of the tip. Part of the information written on the rod is the recommended line test and the recommended weight of the lures that it is safely to cast without harming the rod. Try to stay within these recommendations. After all, it is there for a reason. Next, after you pick a rod, you got to pick a reel. We all probably learn on a spinning reel. They come in different sizes, rated in thousands usually. The higher the thousands of number, the bigger the reel. My favorite size for all-around fishing is a 2000. Spinning reels are for both right-handed and left-handed users, so you don't have to worry about that. You can move the handle from one side to the other, depending on how you feel is more comfortable. So what brand to pick? Well, this has a lot to do with your budget. I use Shimano and Piscifun reels, and my rods are all Cajun rods made in the USA. These are moderately priced rods, and so are the reels, but well worth it. Piscifun is a very affordable brand, by the way, and I've had very good success with their brands. I believe the equipment we use increases our enjoyment of the sport. A great rod will catch more fish. A great reel will be trouble-free and last longer. Next is what type of line to put on the spool of that reel. There are three choices mostly: monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braid. Well, let's briefly talk about each one of these. Monofilament stretches and is less expensive. It's the bargain out of the three. This line, since it is elastic to some extent, will give a fish more ability to spit out the hook and leads to less catches typically. It is also visible in the water to some extent, so the fish can be scared away from the baits. Fluorocarbon, on the other hand, this line is invisible in the water and has very little stretch to it, giving you a solid chance to set the hook and keep the fish on. The fish cannot see this line in the water, and it has great knot strength. Then there's braid. Braid is made up of several strands and is visible in the water. It does not stretch at all, and usually stronger. Smaller diameter of the line itself will cast farther and give you more line on the spool, and has great knot strength. I would recommend fluorocarbon to use on a medium rod. A medium rod, I would put a 6 to 10 pound test on it. And if you go with a medium light rod, I'd go from 4 pounds to 8 pound test. I know. What does the word test mean? It is the amount of weight tension a line can endure before snapping. For instance, if you have a 6 pound line test, you can put a 6 pound weight on it and it should not snap. So the question is, can you catch a big giant fish on really light line? Absolutely you can, and I do it all the time. The front of a spinning reel, there is a dial. I know, it's not there just to make a clicking sound. That's the drag or the tension of the spool. It is common to snap line and break it when your drag is set too tightly. So make sure that you can physically with your hand pull the line off the spool with your hand with tension pulling on it by adjusting that knob clockwise or counterclockwise. Make sure that you can pull that line out and feel that tension. If you screw that knob all the way in, it locks the drag and will snap your line. So adjust it so you can let the fish run while you reel it in. The fish will tire out and you will land your catch without snapping your line. Best all-around baits and lures for our area. Well, we're going to talk a lot about this in today's show. But I make baits by hand and know a thing or two about this subject as well. Small baits catch a lot more fish. Large baits catch bigger fish, but less of them. So let's start with small baits, because catching any fish is just plain old fun. An inline spinner is probably the best all-purpose lure to use for our area. A lot of different ones are on the wall of a tackle shop, so what to choose? A simple yellow and black rooster tail, we call it a bumblebee, is one of the most popular choices for a good reason. It's because they work. Check your rod lure weight limit written on the shaft and go as light as you can for that rod. When you cast this out, let it sink for a few seconds and then steadily reel it in, activating the spinner. What about baits? Our area is known for trout and panfish, so power bait is used a lot here. Rainbow or tequila sunrise are my go-to colors. Use a number 10 hook and a slide weight. Try to never use a clamp weight which you pinch it onto your line. That can damage your line and cause you to not feel the bite. Add a bullet weight, which is an inline weight, to your line by pushing your line all the way through it, and this will actually slide on your line. Then you're going to tie on a barrel connector. It's a double swivel, one side for the weight in and another side for a leader, which is some line that you've cut off your line 3 feet in length. Add that 3 feet to the barrel swivel and tie on the hook. This is your setup for fishing typically. Again, do not add more weight than your rod can tolerate, which is written on the shaft. The great thing about using a slide weight is that you can feel every nibble on your hook and allows the fish to freely run with it, giving you a greater chance to reel them in. There's one more thing which you might find strange to bring with you on your fishing trip. What is it? A pool thermometer. What? Yep. Water temperature is important to know and will tell you where the fish are. It is the first thing on a fish finder we fishermen look at to understand the location of fish in the water. Another episode, or in the next segment, we'll discuss the importance of water temperature. But for now, warm water indicates cold water fish are deep, and vice versa for warm water fish. So let's review. Medium or medium light fast rod, a spinning reel size 2000 or whatever you're comfortable with, fluorocarbon line with a test strength of 6 to 10 pounds on a medium, your choice of lure or bait, and then just have fun. Never forget where you are. The outdoors has sounds and sights that will impress you if you just notice them. One more thing. As far as our etiquette and respect for our surroundings, always leave the place that you fish in better condition than when you found it. Try to pick up all the trash, all the loose line, everything that you have, and put it in a bag and throw it away properly. If you see trash on the ground, do the right thing. Pick it up. Again, we want to leave that environment better than when we found it. And that is a responsibility that each and every one of us have. Let's talk about that pool thermometer. I know that sounds rather weird, but pool thermometers are a simple way of throwing it out there. Don't forget to attach it to something. and figuring out the surface temperature of the water. In our area right now, the weather is warming up, and it's making a big difference in the lake temperatures. Just at Lake of the Woods, I've seen it go 12 degrees in a week up. And it is something that changes where and what fish are. So, let's talk about cold water fish. That would be trout. So, and salmon for that matter. Salmon and trout. And we do have what we call kokanee salmon inside the lakes. Kokanee is another word for landlocked. Now, depending on the lake, they can put different salmon in there. At Lake of the Woods, they put sockeye salmon. Up at Fish Lake, they put Chinook, etc. So, all of them, though, if they cannot breed or lay their eggs in a running stream, these are kokanee salmon. So, it's sort of a category. So, salmon and trout, whether it be a brown trout or whether it be a rainbow trout or a brook trout or whatever, those are cold water fish. And cold water fish like temperatures at under 60 degrees. They want that lake to be under 60 degrees in surface temperature. Now, warm water fish like black and white crappie, perch, although perch is active in both cold and warm water, but mostly warm water, and smallmouth and largemouth bass. These particular fish are warm water fish. They like the temperature at 55 degrees on up. So, we have a sweet spot to where they're shared from 55 to 60 degrees. And at this point, the lake is a shared community. They're not separated. Typically, if cold water is high on the surface, the water's warmer on the bottom. It's separated what is called a thermocline. It's a barrier between warm water and cold water. Now, at this time of year, we start seeing the cold water on top warm up and the warm water on the bottom cool down, and it's changing. It's switching. They're exchanging their positions in the lake. When that happens, we call that a turn. And the thermocline, the barrier, disappears. So right now, what we're seeing, let's say at Lake of the Woods, we're seeing that mix, that change happen. Excuse me. And at this point, you could fish all within the same water column. So this is pretty exciting this time of year. So when you put that temperature gauge out in the water, and it's going to tell you, let's say it says 65 degrees, which is going to happen pretty soon. It says 65 degrees. What does that tell you about trout? That they're going to go deeper to find colder water. What is that going to tell you about crappie and bass and perch? Well, they're coming up. They're enjoying the warming waters. And so now when you put your bait in the water, you need to figure out what fish is in that column. A column of water is the area of the water that you're fishing in or where the fish are. So if you're fishing from shore, you're really going to be focusing on the upper column unless there's a hard drop-off right in front of you. So water temperature has a lot to do with what fish you're going to catch, and it has a lot to do with the type of bait or lure that you're going to put on it. Now, our area is blessed. It truly is. And at Lake of the Woods, which is one of my favorite fishing spots, their water temperature in July gets upwards of 75 to 78 degrees surface temperature. What does that mean? Well, just like we just discussed, the bass like to come up to the warm water. So now you can actually catch bass with a top water lure. I know. This is one of the most exciting things to do, is to throw out a lure out there that stays on top of the water. It's a floating bait. And it could be a popper, a wake bait. It could be all sorts of different surface baits. And you're pulling it like a little motorboat coming out, towards you. And all of a sudden, a bass from underneath breaks surface and explodes. We call it a blow up. And he blows up on that lure. You set that hook, and from beginning to end, from beginning where he bites it to the end of where you get to touch it, you get to see the entire fight. This is one of the most exciting forms of fishing that you could possibly do. And it is my favorite form of fishing. I love topwater fishing. In fact, in July and August, it's pretty much 90% of my fishing, whether it be with light tackle or heavy tackle. I sometimes throw a wake bait out there that is 7.5 inches long. That's right. People see me throw a big, giant thing that looks like a fish, and I make it swim on top. Big baits, like we talked about earlier in the previous segment, big baits catch bigger fish. Smaller baits, smaller fish. But the smallmouth, they like small baits. So don't be surprised you can hook into a 3 or 4 pound smallmouth at Lake of the Woods when you're topwater fishing. This area, Klamath County, is blessed with warm water and cold water. In fact, most of these lakes, a lot of the lakes freeze up in the winter. And come that time of year, we're going to talk about ice fishing. And ice fishing is one of my favorite fishings that you can do. But right now, we are seeing one of the most exciting times of fishing, where temperatures of the water are being shared by both cold water and warm water fish. Remember, tomorrow is the free fishing weekend, tomorrow and after tomorrow. At Lake of the Woods, they have stocked ponds. One of them is a pool where they put a lot of big trout. That's the 6 and under pool for the kids. Also, for those kids with special needs. Happiest day on the lake. To watch your child, even a 3 or 4-year-old, catch a big old trout. Makes Dad jealous. And then they're going to have an area in the marina fenced off for the older children. So everybody will be able to catch a fish. Lots of people there tomorrow. You will truly enjoy the sensation of joy through your child's eyes. It won't be beat. So hopefully you can get to Lake of the Woods tomorrow. Or at least all of you, with no fishing license required this weekend, go out and get your lines wet. And just enjoy nature by the lake. And watch the ospreys and the eagles dive into the water and catching their fish, while you try to catch one of your own. So what a great day that we have tomorrow. What a great hobby we have here in Klamath. It's one of the reasons I moved here. Fishing and bird watching. So make it a point. Enjoy this wonderful sport. Now, you're thinking, Mike, what do I do in warm water to catch a trout? Yep, it does give you sort of a perspective here. How do you do it? Well, I'll tell you. The only way is to get the bait way out there and to get it way down there, right? So as water warms up, you need to fish deeper water. So I'm going to give you a technique. It's one that one of the best trout fishermen I know in the area, he uses, and he catches so many trout. So, get your notepad ready. I'm going to tell you to purchase something, and it won't make much sense, although we talked about it briefly last week. And it's called a water bobber, or some people call it a bubble bobber. It's kind of fun to say bubble bobber. Yep, I want to say it a third time, bubble bobber. Now, the water bobber is a bobber that's cylindrical in shape, and you're going to fill it with water. There's a fatter hole on one side and a narrower hole on the other side. You're going to feed your line through the narrow hole. That's what you're going to do. And it's going to go all the way through the center of this water bobber. Then you're going to tie on a barrel swivel. Now, this is the technique I told you about earlier. But, in the way it's set up, but without a weight, you're using a water bobber. And put on a barrel swivel, and you're going to put 3 to 5 feet of fishing line on it with a small number 10 hook with power bait. Now, you're going to need some pretty strong line for this. So I would suggest at least a 10-pound test, because a water bobber, when it's full of water, is quite heavy. So you're going to throw this baby out there pretty much as far as you can. And what ends up happening with a water bobber is it slowly sinks into the water. It's a little heavier than water because of the plastic and the rubber insert. And it's going to slowly sink down into the water. Power bait floats. So as your water bobber continues to sink into the water column, the power bait's going to float above it 3 to 5 feet. The water bobber is going to rest, not necessarily on the bottom, but it's going to touch the top of the vegetation at the bottom of the lake. And it will move gradually with the currents down there, which moves that floating bait that is floating above it 3 to 5 feet. And as that bait moves slightly, the trout in that cover, right at the bottom or just above the cover, they're going to see it, and they'll jump up and get it. Just like a sliding weight, the water bobber also is a sliding weight. It's just a bobber. And as soon as that you feel that fish hit, remember, there's no resistance between you and the hook. So they're going to grab that hook and they're going to run with it. At that point, set the hook and start reeling it in. A lot of times, my buddy that does this technique, he'll see that fish break surface right in front of him, and he knows, that's mine. And you know what? You're going to say, that's mine, or your buddies. I don't know. So I want you guys to sort of take this technique of using a water bobber, which you could buy at any sporting goods store, buy a barrel swivel, and putting 3 to 5 feet of leader. That's really important. Do not put 2 feet. Do not put 18 inches of leader. Put 3 to 5 feet of leader on that, on your barrel swivel, and attach a hook. And again, choose a power bait that you're comfortable with. Most people do use rainbow. Me, I use rainbow too. But whatever you feel you want, you can get on sale someplace or whatever. What's in your tackle box? Have at it, because those fish, they're going to hit it, and you're going to be able to catch your limit of trout, which happens to be 5. So try this technique. When the water's warming up, you're going to fish deeper. Now that we've covered trout and we've covered what equipment we need, I want you to write down too, if you can, or at least remember, that my YouTube channel, Terrible at Fishing, has videos on all these different things. In fact, I have a less than a 1-minute video on what a water bobber does. But on my YouTube channel, I have wonderful playlists that'll teach you how to catch all of these different fish with lots of different techniques. So now we're going to talk a little bit about lures. So a lure is just another way for us to lure in a fish to our line. So there's lots of different lures out there. Now, one thing about trout, they like little lures. Well, they don't usually go for big lures unless you're going for a brown trout. Brown trouts, they like big giant lures. But since I'm a bass fisherman and I make and design fishing lures for bass, we're going to talk a little bit about hard lures to catch bass. And believe it or not, as much as everybody around here likes to talk about trout, they kind of ignore bass. And both largemouth and smallmouth bass, they're smarter. They really are. You wonder about a bass fisherman. If you ever watch a show, he's got all these different rods in his boat. And all these different rods, you're thinking, what does he need all those rods for? Well, it's because bass are smart. They're really smart. A bass has instinctive memory. As soon as you catch a bass on something, it remembers that lure and that technique. And you cannot catch the same bass the same way twice. I know it. Now, you can catch trout all day long on power bait, worms, a spinner. You can't do that with bass. A bass presents a challenge to each and every one of us that like to bass fish. And that's why we like doing it. It's not a cheap hobby. Not at all. And in fact, typically you'll see me on my boat. I have at least 4 rods, sometimes 6, sometimes more. All depends on the water temperature and what I'm shooting for, or the wind conditions. So with bass fishing, we need to have different strengths of rod that handle different lightnesses or heavinesses of our lures. And some of them are designed to throw big, giant, multi-ounce lures. Some of them are designed for very light, fraction of an ounce lures. And we have to sort of adjust to conditions. I could be throwing a lure out there and catching 10 fish in 40 minutes. I mean, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good 40 minutes. And all of a sudden it disappears. It stops like you at a red light. I mean, it just boom. Well, that means my fish got smart. And now I got to reach down, grab another rod for another technique and try to regain that feeding frenzy that I had prior. So when you go into a store and you see all these lures up on the wall, and there's a lot of them, they all have different lips, those little protrusions at the front of the lure. Some of them are little, some of them are really long. The length of that lip tells you how deep it's going to dive. So a longer lip, deeper dive. Shorter lip, shallower dive. If the lip is not at an angle, but sort of looks like a dam, right at the front, it's almost straight up and down, perpendicular to the bait, that's a wake bait. That means it's just going to push water, but it's not going to allow the bait to dive. Now, some lures do not have lips. We call those lipless lures. A lipless is usually a slow sinking lure, and it allows you to choose the depth by just waiting a certain amount of time and pulling it in. And one thing about bass lures, they have a rattle. They actually have a rattle in them. Let me grab one here. This is what they sound like. Sounds like a baby rattle, huh? Some of them are really loud. Some are silent. Not many. But a bass lure, this is what it sounds like. And bass are attracted to that sound. I also find that bass like 70s music. Just FYI. I like to play music while I'm fishing. And, you know, the common thing was, shh, be quiet, we're fishing. Well, I'm not a quiet person. It's part of being Italian and living in a very loud household growing up. I'm not a very quiet guy. You probably didn't notice that about me. But bass, they're kind of Italians. I mean, one is called a largemouth. No offense to Italians out there, but I have a very loud family. And these guys like noise. And one thing about bass, they're very protective of their territory. So when they hear and see something making noise, running through the water towards them, they're very protective. They might not even be hungry. The nice thing about lure fishing is that lure fishing is an instinctive bite. It's a reactionary bite. And so what ends up happening is that a bass will see this loud, obnoxious thing coming into their territory. And what do? Again, they're very protective. They will attack what they deem as a threat. And so the great thing about lure fishing is that you can catch fish all day long. See, typically with baits, you're really going to have the active time of day early in the morning and late in the evening, or late in the afternoon, towards the evening. And that's when that's their feeding time. But with lures are different. These fish will actually attack this without thinking, without even noticing that they're hungry. And they will do it all day long. Now, mind you, they'll do it more in the mornings and the evenings, but you can catch fish all day long with lures because it's a reactive strike. It's done purely on instinct. That's the fun about fishing with lures. Now, another great thing about these lips on lures, they will dive at different depths. So if you're not getting bites at 4 feet, choose a lure that goes down to 6 feet or 9 feet or 10 feet and fish those different depths. And you could do that by simply pulling a hard bait with a lip that's a little bit bigger. That's all you got to do. And the fish will go ahead and be at these different depths. One thing about lures, and I talked about this in one of my videos on my YouTube channel, is presentation. Presenting that lure to a fish or a bait or whatever. You need to do it in a way that, 1, they deem it as a threat, 2, or as food. So what ends up happening when I pull a lure through the water is that I pause it a lot. I'll do little short tugs on the tip of my rod. What that does, it gives the lure in the water a change of direction. It'll dart left or right or pause. Fish are opportunists. A fish wants to have an opportunity to get it. So if it sees a change of direction or a pause, they will usually strike at that point. Now, mind you, they will hit it on a straight retrieve. And sometimes a straight retrieve is the best retrieve. But most of the time, stop and starting your bait is a great way of giving a fish an opportunity to hit and strike it. So try that with a bait. And understand the water temperature, because that'll tell you how deep a bait that you want to go with. Now, at Lake of the Woods, we have about 8 feet of water on a lot of it. Actually, the whole lake averages only 17 feet. So even though it has deep parts of 60 feet, most of the lake is about 10 feet deep. So it's kind of fun to take a bait and run it towards the bottom of the lake, because a lot of fish are actually on the bottom of the lake. Now, I will tell you this about largemouth and smallmouth. They like two different areas of the lake. A smallmouth bass, they like rocky bottoms. So, at Lake of the Woods, if you go to the main marina and fish it between the marina and Aspen Point, that's all rocky, hard pan area. Smallmouth bass love that area. And smallmouth bass is the best fighting fish there is in the water. Maybe given a run for its money with a brown trout. Brown trouts, though, they like to swim straight down, and it's like pulling up a boat anchor. But with a smallmouth, that's where they like to live, on that rocky bottom. Now, largemouth, they're not much for rocky bottoms. They like to camouflage themselves in the thicket of grass. So, on the other side of the marina, on across Rainbow Bay there, or over on the west side, you'll find the largemouth. Now, I also love the south end. The south end's got a lot of great vegetation. Also, the lily pads. That's a different subject, by the way. So, the grassy areas are going to be for the largemouth. And the neat thing about a lake like Lake of the Woods is that you basically have segregation between a largemouth and a smallmouth environment. It's easy to find these fish in Lake of the Woods. Really easy to find these fish. So next time you go out there, I want you to try some of these baits, with these lips. Understand, maybe somebody at the marina, wherever you go, will tell you what the water temperature is. I always inform them of the water temperature when I'm on the lake. And I go out onto Lake of the Woods a couple times a week easy. So you may see me out there. If you do, I'm on an inflatable pontoon boat built for two. Lots of gear on it. And I'm a kind of a large guy. And my family called it big boned. I would love to lose weight, but it's just the way it is. A lot of people ask me, why do I call my channel Terrible at Fishing? I go, well, I'll tell you briefly. A few years ago, about 5 years ago, I had a blood clot in my brain, and it paralyzed me, caused a lot of seizures for 7 months. I was a total mess. And I have 3 children, so I needed to practice talking. And so I started Terrible at Fishing, which I was pretty terrible, as a source of practicing talk without depressing my children or my wife. And so I started the channel then. And Terrible at Fishing became kind of a fun thing for me. And it became a fun thing for all those that want to learn how to fish. Well, I've gotten a lot better. Not totally, but a lot better. I can walk with almost never falling down. And obviously my mouth has been fixed, to the chagrin of many, many people. So I hope this segment will help you catch more largemouth bass. In our next segment, we're going to talk about other things. So stay tuned. Well, welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. We've talked about a lot today, haven't we? Wow. Talked about trout fishing. We've talked about bass fishing. We've talked about what kind of gear to have. Well, I'm going to talk to you about color? Now, this won't help many people that are colorblind, but what color of lure or bait should we use? Fish, they don't see things like we do. In fact, a lot of them see sort of an ultraviolet color, like birds do. But some of them, they don't see certain colors at all. Some see some colors better. For instance, if you were to think about what color a trout sees best, a lot of people would probably say chartreuse, red, something like that. Those are good guesses. They're just wrong. A trout actually sees the color blue better than all other colors. And then you take that color blue that a trout sees best, and you kind of think, well, maybe that works for bass. Well, bass don't have blue cones. They don't see the color blue at all. They see it as sort of a silver. So, they do see something. They just don't see that color. So, when I design a lure, I have to think what colors to put on this lure, what patterns to put on this lure in order to fool a fish into hitting it. And then there's water. Water. There's what we call stained water. Stained water is dark water. Has very little clarity in it. You just can't see 2 feet in front of it. And there's clear water, like Lake of the Woods. Lake of the Woods has wonderfully clear water I've seen it up to 20 feet in clarity. But typically, easy 12 feet of clarity at Lake of the Woods. Why is this important? Well, it's because you need light, each and every one of us. We need light to see color. Without light, you don't see color at all. Think about it. What color do you see in a dark room? Not a much. And that's the trick. There's a simple rule about picking colorful lures or not. You pick colorful lures, bright lures, for clear water. And you pick dark lures for dark water. Now you think, Mike, why can't they see a bright lure in dark water? Well, in darker water, what ends up happening is that they look at the profile of the bait. They're looking at the outline of the bait. It's sort of like seeing a dark shadow in a dark room. You can't see a person's face. You can't see what they're wearing, but you can see the outline. They might be wearing a hat, a cloak, and you can see sort of the shape of somebody. That's what fish see in stained waters. But in a nice bright room, you could see that they were wearing all these colors in their hair and their eyes and things like that. So I know it sounds kind of strange, but light colors in light water, clear water, dark colors in dark water. It's that simple. Now that you know that trout see blue better and bass don't see blue at all, now you're going to go onto this bait wall and you're sort of looking at it. You're thinking, So you ask the guy behind the counter, who's probably never fished, because I don't find that around here. Everybody around here in sporting goods stores, they like to hunt. Well, I hunt fish, but not a lot of fishermen in the sporting goods stores here. And so you may ask him, so what do you think works in our area? And he's going to say, well, people buy this. That's not a good answer. Just because people buy it doesn't mean it works. A lot of people buy things that don't work, or they don't know how to work it. So I will, sort of stick to that rule. Bright colors for clear water, Dark colors for dark water. Now, when I recommend you buying a lure, I need you to learn the lure. What do you mean, Mike? What do you mean? Learn the lure. You just throw it out there and pull it back, right? Well, in basics, yeah. But every lure has sort of a sweet spot. It wants to be fished and pulled at a different speed. It may want you to change directions on it. So what do you do with a brand new lure? The very first thing you do with a lure is you just toss it about 10 feet in front of you. And you pull it in through the water at different speeds. And look at it. Watch it. Put a few tugs on it. See what it does. Go fast. See what it does. You know, there are some of my lures that are designed to be pulled very, very painfully slow. It'll hurt you. Your hand's just going really slow. Like one rotation every 3 seconds. And it's driving you nuts. But the bait is doing what it needs to do. And then there's some baits, like lipless cranks, that you need to just burn through the water. You know, you're just going to reel it in really quick, and it's just going to be a baby rattle in the water. You need to watch that lure. The first thing you do with a lure is you're going to throw it about 10 or 20 feet in front of you and just watch it. And reel it in different speeds. Try a few tricks with your tip and watch what it does. This is crucial to fishing with lures. It works also for spinners. If you need to know how slow can you pull that spinner and still have the spinner spin. How fast can you do? Learning a bait is part of the fun of fishing. So when you toss that thing out 40 or 50 yards, or whatever it may be, you need to know what it's doing. If you don't see what it does at certain speeds and different taps of the tip and things like that, you have no idea what your presentation is to the fish when it's out of sight. So this is a very important thing to learn. You need to take that new bait, throw it in the water in front of you, and just play with it for a few minutes. Only takes a minute or two. And see what it does. What's it going to do if you pull it really, really fast? Some of them completely lose their equilibriums and they spin out of control. And you don't want that. You just don't want that. You want one that the bait is designed for. Really, really light baits. And I do what's called bait finesse fishing. It is a specialized reel with an ultralight rod. And I use really light lures. And some of these lures, I cannot use quick snaps. A quick snap is that little barrel swivel on it with a little hook on it that you can close and open. And you can quickly change baits. Some of them I can't do that because the quick snap is too heavy for the front of this small finesse hard bait, and it causes it to do bad things. So I have to tie my line directly to it and let the lure all by itself do what it wants to do. This is part of fishing. It's part of the joy of it. You know, I have thousands of lures. I know it's weird. I have thousands of lures, and I constantly paint new designs on my lures. Soon I'll be making soft baits and molding them and painting them. So all these things will have their own unique characteristic. And you need to learn those characteristics. And that will catch you a lot of fish. When I see you at the lake, I'll say hi to you. You say hi to me. I'll ask you how it's going. And if you say, not too good, Mike, I want to see what you're using. And I want to see how you're using it. And we'll get you fixed rather quickly. We really will. It's all about learning the lure and presenting the lure in a reasonable way to the fish. Every lure I throw has its personality. They just all do. And you need to learn that personality. So next time you go to the store, think first, is the water I'm going to be fishing dark or clear? And then choose a lure based on that. Small lures catch more fish. It's just the way it is. Large lures catch bigger fish. It's just the way it is. You just don't catch a lot of them. But it's just a wow moment when you catch a fish with a big giant lure. People look at my big lures, and I have a lot of 5 to 8 inch lures in my tackle. People look at them and think I'm nuts. But then again, I catch big fish. But I love BFS, Bait Finesse System. My number one more fun pole to use is my light pole. Because every fish, whether it be a 1/4 pounder with cheese or not, feels big. Yeah, I catch a smallmouth on my ultralight, and it's like catching a whale. You'll hear that bait clicker click, that and you know you've got fun on the line. You also want to make sure that you take more than one bait, just FYI. Snags are something that we all endure. When you get a snag, you're going to tighten your drag all the way up, and you're going to, sort of pull that rod back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and hopefully let that hook let loose of whatever it's hooked on. Sometimes you got to get different angles. So walk up and down. If you're on the shore, walk up and down, trying to get a different angle on that. And again, tug, 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 tug. Try to get that hook out from that rock or that piece of wood or whatever it's got caught on. Sometimes the worst happens. A snag gets you. So if that happens to you, and hats off, it just happens to each and every fisherman out there, you're going to have to pull real hard and snap that line and break that line and retie your rig and put your backup lure or bait on it. So don't feel too bad, besides losing a little bit of money. But it happens to each and every one of us, professional and amateur. Just remember, always have a backup. And I'll tell you, there's a common salutation us fishermen use. We say tight lines. It's sort of it's to wish somebody well. So you say tight lines. And the reason for that is because when you catch a fish, you got to keep the line tight. Remember to adjust your drag in a way that allows the fish to run, but not run away from you. You want to reel in more than they run. And so adjust your drag in a way that allows the fish to run, but still make progress at bringing them back to you. So remember that. And the next time you're out on the lake, and I hope it is this weekend, because there's no excuse unless you're working, but we got water all around us. I would love to see everybody get a line wet this weekend, because it's free fishing weekend. Just remember, here at Terrible at Fishing, it's just old Michael Ruffino. Check out my YouTube channel, and I wish all of you tight lines. Take care.